You know what they say about peaceful mining colonies on the edge of civilized space? They're about as peaceful as a loaded gun with a hair trigger. Kepler Station had been sitting pretty for 3 standard rotations now, which in frontier terms meant it was practically ancient history and overdue for catastrophe. Commander Cole hadn't gotten where he was by trusting good luck, especially not the kind that lasted this long. The grizzled security chief stood at the observation deck's reinforced windows, watching the morning shift trudge toward the excavation sites like ants heading to a picnic. A picnic that something nasty was probably planning to crash. "Morning, sunshine," Amy chirped as she breezed past with her medical kit. The colony's doctor had this annoying habit of being cheerful before noon, which Cole found deeply suspicious in anyone over the age of 16. Another beautiful day in paradise, wouldn't you say? Cole grunted, which in his vocabulary meant everything from "good morning" to "I've seen things that would make you weep," depending on the pitch. Today, it leaned more toward the latter. The thing about Kepler Station was that it had committed the cardinal sin of frontier colonies. It had gotten comfortable. 312 souls called this rock home now, including 89 children ranging from gap-toothed toddlers to gangly teenagers who thought they knew everything. The kids had turned the sterile corridors into something resembling actual civilization, with their laughter echoing off metal walls and their artwork plastered on every available surface. It was almost nice, which was exactly why Cole's gut was twisting itself into knots. "Helen wants to see you," Amy added, pausing at the corridor junction. "Something about the quarterly security report." Cole's grunt this time translated roughly to, "Politicians give me indigestion." But Amy had already disappeared around the corner, probably off to patch up someone who'd gotten too friendly with the mining equipment. Again, the administrative sector smelled like recycled air and broken dreams, same as every bureaucratic hub Cole had ever had the misfortune to visit. Helen sat behind her desk like a queen holding court, though her kingdom consisted mainly of spreadsheets and supply requisitions. "Cole, darling, we need to talk about your latest paranoia episode," she said without looking up from her tablet. Helen had this wonderful talent for making every conversation sound like she was addressing a particularly slow child. "The families are getting nervous about your security drills." "My security drills are the only thing keeping those families breathing," Cole replied, settling into the chair across from her desk. The chair protested his weight with a squeal that suggested it shared Helen's opinion of him. "Oh, please." Helen finally glanced up, her expression somewhere between exasperated and condescending. "We're 43 light-years from the nearest shipping lane. The most dangerous thing we've encountered in 3 rotations was Mrs. Patterson's cooking at the Harvest Festival." Cole had been married to the military long enough to know when someone was tempting fate with a sledgehammer. "That livestock didn't walk off the outer farms by itself. Predators, Cole. Native wildlife. Not everything is a conspiracy." The conversation continued in this delightful fashion for another 20 minutes, with Helen systematically dismissing every concern Cole raised, while he systematically planned her hypothetical funeral arrangements. By the time he escaped her office, his jaw was aching from clenching his teeth. The afternoon shift brought no relief from his growing unease. The sensor arrays had been acting up for weeks now, registering phantom contacts that vanished the moment anyone looked twice. The outer perimeter posts reported strange lights in the upper atmosphere, but the readings never matched anything in their databases. Cole found himself gravitating toward the colony's heart, the communal areas where the children gathered after their lessons. Little Emma was showing off her latest crayon masterpiece to anyone who'd listen, while 10-year-old Marcus regaled a captive audience with increasingly improbable tales of space pirates. The teenagers clustered near the recreation terminals, engaged in the universal adolescent activity of pretending adults didn't exist. "They're good kids," Amy observed, joining him at the observation rail. "All of them." "Yeah." Cole's voice carried the weight of someone who'd seen too many good kids in too many bad situations. "They deserve better than this." "Better than what? A loving community? Safety? Education?" Cole turned to study her profile. Amy was younger than him by at least a decade, but something in her eyes suggested she'd seen her share of ugliness too. "You ever wonder why a doctor with your qualifications ended up on a mining station in the middle of nowhere?" Her smile didn't quite reach those knowing eyes. "Same reason. A decorated military commander ended up babysitting asteroid miners, I'd imagine." Before Cole could probe deeper into that interesting deflection, the proximity alarms began their ear-splitting symphony of doom. The sound cut through the colony's evening routine like a plasma cutter through hull plating, sending children scurrying toward their parents and adults toward their emergency stations. Cole was moving before his conscious mind caught up, muscle memory from a dozen combat deployments overriding civilian protocols. The command center was already buzzing with activity by the time he arrived. Technicians hunched over displays that painted a picture no one wanted to see. "Report," he barked, sliding into his station with practiced efficiency. "Contact bearing 268. Range decreasing rapidly," announced Petty Officer Kim, her voice admirably steady despite the fact that her hands were shaking. "Mass profile suggests—" "Oh, this can't be right." "What can't be right?" "Computer estimates 1,500 meters length. Unknown configuration. It's massive, sir." Cole felt his stomach drop into his boots. Ships that size didn't visit mining colonies for social calls. "Defense grid?" "Online and ready, but—" "Sir?" Kim's voice trailed off as she studied her readings. "Whatever that thing is, it's not showing up on conventional scans. Our targeting systems can't get a lock." The main display flickered to life, showing a view of space that should have been reassuringly empty. Instead, something that looked like it had been designed by a committee of nightmares hung in the void above them. The ship was all angles and aggression, covered in what looked like scales or armor plating that seemed to shift and move in the starlight. "Well," Cole muttered, watching as smaller craft began detaching from the main vessel like parasites abandoning a host. "This is going to ruin everyone's day." The communication array crackled to life, filling the command center with a sound that was part static, part growl, and entirely unwelcome. When the translation matrix finally made sense of the alien transmission, Cole found himself wishing it hadn't bothered. "Greetings, soft mammals." The voice was cultured, almost pleasant, with an undertone that suggested its owner found the entire situation amusing. "I am War Chief Gextor of the Scaroth Ascendancy, and I have come to collect what is mine." Helen burst through the command center doors at precisely the wrong moment, her administrative mind still trying to process the situation through the lens of proper procedures and filing systems. "Cole, what's the meaning of all this noise? Some of us are trying to finalize the quarterly." She stopped talking when she saw the main display. Her face went through several interesting color changes before settling on a pale green that matched her complexion to her preferred paperwork folders. "I do so enjoy these first meetings," Gextor continued, his translated voice carrying clear amusement. "Your defensive systems are quite charming, though entirely inadequate. Please power down your weapons and prepare to receive my boarding parties. Resistance will only prolong the inevitable and increase your casualty estimates." Cole keyed the response channel, choosing his words with the care of a man defusing a bomb. This is Commander Cole of Kepler Station. State your intentions." The laughter that echoed from the speakers made everyone in the command center flinch. It was the kind of laugh that belonged in the soundtrack of nightmares, full of teeth and terrible knowledge. "My intentions, little mammal? How refreshingly direct. I intend to take what your species produces better than any other in this sector of the galaxy." Gextor paused, letting the silence stretch until it became unbearable. "Your offspring." The words hit the command center like a physical blow. Kim actually staggered, while Helen made a sound somewhere between a gasp and a whimper. Cole felt something cold and primal unfurl in his chest, something that had been sleeping since his last deployment. "I'm afraid that's not going to happen," he said, his voice carrying an edge that made everyone in the room take a step back. "Oh, but it is," Gextor replied, and Cole could practically hear the smile in his voice. "You see, human children are quite valuable in certain markets. Their adaptability, their learning capacity, their delightfully malleable young minds, they make excellent servants once properly trained." The first explosion rocked the station, sending everyone scrambling for handholds as the gravity generators struggled to compensate. Emergency lighting bathed everything in angry red, making the command center look like the inside of a beating heart. "Shield generators are offline," Kim reported, her training taking over despite the terror in her eyes. "Multiple hull breaches in sectors 4 through 6. They're coming in fast." Cole watched the tactical display update with incoming hostiles and felt something he hadn't experienced in years, the cold certainty that he was about to fail at something that mattered more than his own life. 36 children lived on this station, from 3-year-old Emma with her gap-toothed grin to 16-year-old David, who was already talking about joining the Merchant Marine. He'd sworn an oath once, a long time ago, to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. Today, that oath was about to be tested in ways he'd never imagined. "All hands, this is Commander Cole," he announced over the station-wide communication system. "We are under attack by hostile forces. Execute Emergency Protocol Delta 9 immediately. This is not a drill." As the lights of Kepler Station flickered and died around them, Cole found himself wondering if 36 children were about to teach the galaxy a lesson about what happened when someone made the mistake of threatening humanity's cubs. He had a feeling the lesson was going to be written in blood. War Chief Gextor stepped through the breach in Kepler Station's hull like he owned the place, which, considering the circumstances, wasn't entirely inaccurate. The Scaroth leader stood nearly 3 meters tall, covered in scales that shifted from deep emerald to burnished copper depending on the light. His head was distinctly reptilian, with golden eyes that held the cold intelligence of an apex predator who'd never met anything he couldn't eventually eat. "Ah, the delightful aroma of terrified mammals," he announced to no one in particular, his voice carrying that same cultured amusement that had echoed through the command center moments before. "It never gets old." Behind him flowed his boarding party, 20 Scaroth warriors in powered armor that looked like it had been designed by someone with a serious grudge against aesthetics. They moved with the fluid grace of Born. Hunters, energy weapons held ready, but not quite aimed. After all, what threat could a handful of soft-skinned humans possibly pose? Cole had managed to rally 18 colonists with some semblance of combat training, mostly miners who'd served in the territorial conflicts before settling down to the quiet life of rock-breaking and child-rearing. They'd taken defensive positions throughout the residential sectors, turning the colony's own corridors into a maze of choke points and ambush sites. It was a textbook guerrilla defense, executed with the kind of desperate competence that comes from having everything you love threatened by something with more teeth than conscience. It lasted exactly 6 minutes. "Really now," Gextor said, stepping over the unconscious form of Petty Officer Kim, who'd had the poor judgment to take a stun blast to the chest. "This is almost insulting. I was hoping for at least a little challenge." The Scaroth had brought toys that made the colony's defensive weapons look like children's drawings of actual firearms. Personal shield generators turned every warrior into a walking tank, while their stun weapons dropped humans faster than bad news at a wedding. "They didn't kill anyone," Cole noted grimly. "Dead merchandise didn't fetch premium prices at slave markets." He pressed himself against the corridor wall, plasma rifle clutched in hands that hadn't shaken in combat for over a decade. 3 of his people were down. Another 5 had been dragged away in restraints, and the rest were scattered throughout the station playing a losing game of hide-and-seek with enemies who hunted for sport. "Cole!" Amy's voice crackled through his comm unit. "They're herding everyone toward the main community center. It's some kind of selection process." Cole closed his eyes and tried very hard not to think about what selection process might mean when applied to children by creatures who viewed them as valuable merchandise. He failed spectacularly. The community center had been transformed into something that belonged in nightmares rather than family gatherings. The Scaroth had set up portable containment fields in neat rows, each one just large enough to hold a small human. Gextor supervised the proceedings from an improvised throne made from mining equipment, his golden eyes tracking every movement with predatory interest. "Bring me the young ones first," he ordered, his translated voice carrying across the suddenly silent space. "Ages 3 to 16, as specified by our clients. The older ones can be disposed of, if they become difficult." Cole watched through a ventilation grate as 36 children were separated from their parents and herded toward the containment fields. Little Emma clutched her favorite stuffed animal, tears streaming down her face as she called for her mother. Marcus had stopped telling his space pirate stories and was trying to comfort the younger kids, his 10-year-old face set in grim determination that no child should ever have to wear. The teenagers formed a protective cluster around the little ones, 16-year-old David stepping forward like he planned to take on an entire boarding party with nothing but righteous indignation and adolescent fury. "You can't just take us," he announced, his voice cracking only slightly. "We're citizens of the Terran Colonial Alliance. There are laws." Gextor's laughter cut through David's protest like a plasma cutter through tissue paper. "Laws? Oh, my dear little mammal. The only law that matters out here is the law of tooth and claw. And I have considerably more of both than you do." He gestured to one of his warriors, who stepped forward and activated a neural disruptor. David collapsed like a puppet with severed strings, unconscious before he hit the deck plating. "Anyone else feeling particularly heroic?" Gextor asked pleasantly. "No? How wonderfully practical of you." Cole counted his remaining ammunition and tried to calculate angles of attack that didn't end with everyone he cared about becoming collateral damage. The math was depressingly straightforward. He had 1 plasma rifle, 6 energy cells, and a suicide wish. The Scaroth had superior numbers, better equipment, and a completely justified confidence in their ability to squash anything Cole could throw at them. It was, by any reasonable military assessment, a completely hopeless situation. Cole had never been particularly reasonable. He dropped through the ventilation grate behind 3 Scaroth warriors, plasma rifles spitting coherent energy at point-blank range. His first shot overloaded one alien's shield generator, the second punched through armor plating, and the third sent a warrior spinning into a support pillar hard enough to leave a dent. For approximately 30 seconds, Cole felt like the protagonist of an action holodrama. Unstoppable, righteous, and devastatingly effective. He managed to take down 2 more Skarath before reality reasserted itself in the form of a stun blast that turned his nervous system into a fireworks display. He hit the deck hard, rifle skittering away across blood-slicked metal. Through the haze of neural disruption, he could see Gextor approaching with the leisurely pace of someone who had all the time in the galaxy. Well, well, the war chief mused, crouching beside Cole's twitching form. The local security chief, I presume. How refreshingly predictable. Did you really think a handful of soft mammals could stand against the Skarath ascendancy? Cole tried to form words, but his tongue felt like it belonged to someone else. Someone who'd been struck by lightning and then asked to perform brain surgery. I do appreciate the effort, though, Gextor continued conversationally. It adds a certain dramatic flair to the proceedings. The children will remember this moment for the rest of their lives, however long or short those lives might prove to be. He stood, brushing imaginary dust from his scaled hands. Finish loading the merchandise. Our buyers are waiting. And punctuality is such an important virtue in business. Cole watched helplessly as the children were herded into the containment fields one by one. Emma's stuffed animal fell forgotten on the deck, a small casualty of casual cruelty. Marcus tried to keep the younger ones calm, but his own terror was bleeding through the brave facade he'd constructed. Oh, and Commander? Gextor paused at the exit, golden eyes glittering with malicious amusement. Don't feel too badly about your failure here today. Your species simply wasn't designed for this kind of conflict. You're builders, not warriors. Nurturers, not hunters. It's really not your fault that evolution shortchanged you in all the important categories. He gestured to his remaining warriors. Leave the adults alive. I want them to remember this day, to tell others what happens when the Skarath come calling. Fear spreads faster than plague, and it's far more profitable in the long run. The boarding party withdrew as efficiently as they'd arrived, leaving behind a colony in ruins and 36 empty beds that would haunt every survivor's dreams. Cole lay on the deck plating, neural disruptor effects slowly fading, and listened to the sound of parents calling their children's names into the uncaring void. Through the breach in the station's hull, he could see Gextor's ship preparing to depart. The war chief's laughter echoed across the communication channels one last time, a sound that would follow Cole into whatever nightmares awaited him. Thank you for your contribution to galactic commerce, Gextor announced cheerfully. The children will make excellent servants once we break them of their unfortunate attachment to freedom. Do try not to mourn too long. It's really quite pointless. The massive alien vessel began to turn away from Kepler Station, its scaled hull reflecting the light of distant stars. In its cargo holds, 36 human children huddled together in containment fields, calling for parents who could no longer hear them. Cole finally managed to sit up, his hands shaking as he reached for his fallen weapon. Around him, the survivors began the grim process of counting their losses and treating their wounded. Someone was crying. Someone else was cursing in 3 different languages. The medical bay's emergency beacon was broadcasting its shrill demand for attention, but all Cole could hear was Gextor's laughter, echoing in his memory like a promise of nightmares to come. The war chief had made one critical error in his assessment of human nature, though he wouldn't realize it until much later. Humans weren't just builders and nurturers. They were also the kind of species that would burn down the galaxy to get their children back. Gextor was about to get a very educational lesson in exactly what that meant. Cole pushed himself to his feet, plasma rifle hanging loose in his grip, and began to plan a war chief's funeral. 3 days after Gextor's departure, Cole stood in what used to be the community center, staring at a stuffed animal that somehow represented everything wrong with the universe. Emma's toy rabbit sat abandoned on the deck plating, one button eye missing and its pink fur stained with blast residue. It looked exactly how Cole felt, damaged, forgotten, and utterly inadequate for the task ahead. "You know," Amy said, joining him in his contemplation of tragic stuffed animals, "brooding dramatically isn't going to bring them back." Cole glanced at her sideways. The good doctor had spent the past 3 days patching up blast wounds and administering sedatives to parents who kept screaming their children's names in their sleep. She looked like she'd been through a food processor, but her eyes held the same cold determination that was eating Cole alive from the inside. "Got a better suggestion?" he asked. Amy pulled out a data pad and handed it to him. "Actually, yes. I've been doing some research into our scaly friend and his business model. Turns out War Chief Gextor has something of a reputation in the galactic underworld." The datapad displayed a criminal profile that read like a horror novelist's fever dream. Gextor had been running slaving operations for over 20 standard rotations, specializing in what the file euphemistically called high-value juvenile acquisitions. His client list included some of the galaxy's most notorious collectors, beings who viewed sentient children as exotic pets or entertainment. "Charming," Cole muttered, scrolling through the litany of atrocities. "Says here he operates out of the Crimson Nebula. That's not exactly a vacation destination." "No, it's not." Amy's voice carried the flat tone of someone who'd seen too much medical data about what happened to children in Gextor's care. "But it also says he keeps his inventory aboard his flagship for processing and conditioning. The kids are still alive, Cole. Still recoverable." Cole studied her profile in the dim emergency lighting. "You're not just a colony medic, are you? And you're not just a washed-up security chief with anger management issues." Amy smiled, but it was the kind of smile that belonged on a predator's face. "I used to work trauma surgery for the Terran Special Operations Command. Saw plenty of what creatures like Gextor leave behind. Why didn't you say something before? Same reason you didn't mention your real military service record. Sometimes the past is supposed to stay buried." She gestured at the empty community center. "But sometimes the past comes in handy when the present goes completely to hell." Cole felt something shift in his chest, a cold certainty settling into place, like the final piece of a weapon being assembled. "I'm going after them." "We're going after them," Amy corrected. "You'll need medical support, and I have personal reasons for wanting to see Gextor's operation shut down permanently." "This isn't your fight. Those children were under my medical care." Amy's voice cut through his objection like a scalpel through tissue. "That makes it very much my fight." Before Cole could argue further, heavy footsteps echoed through the corridor. Hammer appeared in the doorway, his mining engineer's coveralls replaced by something that looked suspiciously like military-grade combat gear. Behind him stood Kai, the young pilot, whose usual cocky grin had been replaced by an expression of barely contained fury. "Heard you were planning a little field trip," Hammer said, settling his considerable bulk against the doorframe. "Thought you might need some technical expertise." Kai nodded toward the datapad. "And someone who knows the shipping lanes around the Crimson Nebula. I've run cargo through there before, back when I was less particular about my clients." Cole looked around at his impromptu crew. A trauma surgeon with secrets, a demolitions expert who'd apparently been holding out on his military background, and a pilot with questionable morals and excellent timing. It was either the worst rescue team in galactic history or exactly what the situation demanded. "This isn't going to be a standard operation," he warned them. "Gextor's got a fully armed battlecruiser and enough firepower to level a small moon. We'll be going in with whatever we can scrounge up from the colony's emergency supplies." "Actually," Kai said, pulling out his own datapad, "I might have a solution to our transportation problem. There's a smuggler named Vex who owes me a considerable favor. His ship isn't much to look at, but it's fast and equipped with some very illegal modifications. And I know someone who can provide intelligence on Gextor's operation," Amy added. "A former colleague who works the information trade in the Outer Rim. She'll have current data on his ship's location and defensive capabilities." Hammer cracked his knuckles, producing a sound like small explosions. "I can handle the technical side of whatever insane plan you're cooking up. Spent some time with the Terran Engineering Corps before I decided mining was safer. Turns out I was wrong about that." Cole felt the weight of command settling on his shoulders like a familiar coat. It had been 8 rotations since he'd led a team into hostile territory. 8 rotations since he'd been responsible for lives other than his own. The muscle memory was still there, though, along with the cold calculation that separated successful soldiers from dead heroes. "All right," he said, decision crystallizing in his mind. "Here's what we're going to do." The next 48 hours passed in a blur of clandestine communications and questionable decision-making. Amy's contact, a Valdorian information broker named Zeth, provided detailed intelligence on Gextor's current location and operational parameters. The news was both better and worse than expected. Better. The War Chief's flagship was currently docked at a processing station in the Crimson Nebula's outer ring, taking on supplies and preparing the children for transport to their final buyers. Worse, the processing station was essentially a mobile fortress, protected by defensive platforms and patrolled by enough firepower to discourage casual visitors. "The good news," Kai announced, reviewing the tactical data, "is that Vex's ship can get us past the outer patrols without triggering their sensor grids. The bad news is that once we're inside, we'll be on our own." "What about extraction?" Hammer asked, studying the station's structural schematics. "Getting in is one thing, but getting out with 36 kids is going to be considerably more complicated." Cole had been thinking about that problem for the past 6 hours. "We don't extract. We take the entire station." The silence that followed was the kind reserved for people who'd just announced their intention to juggle live plasma grenades while riding a meteor into a black hole. "Explain," Amy said carefully. "Gextor's operation depends on mobility and secrecy. Take out the station's engines and communication arrays, and suddenly he's trapped in the nebula with no way to call for help." Cole pulled up the station schematics on the main display. "Hammer can handle the technical sabotage. Kai keeps our escape route warm. Amy provides medical support and tactical backup." "And what do you do while we're running around playing commando?" Kai asked. Cole's smile was the kind that made smart people check their life insurance policies. "I go have a conversation with War Chief Gextor about the fundamental differences between human parents and every other species he's encountered." "That's not a plan," Amy observed. "That's barely even a good suicide note." "It's the plan we have." Cole looked around at his team, seeing his own determination reflected in their faces. "Anyone wants to back out, now's the time." Nobody moved. 43 hours later, they were aboard Vex's ship, a rust bucket freighter that looked like it had been assembled from spare parts and held together by prayer and criminal negligence. The smuggler himself was a Corellian, with more scars than sense, and a tendency to grin at inappropriate moments. "Beautiful morning for a suicide run," Vex announced as they approached the Crimson Nebula's outer edge. "The radiation storm should provide excellent cover for our approach, assuming they don't cook us all to death first." Cole watched the nebula grow larger on the view screen, its crimson gases swirling in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Somewhere in that cosmic maelstrom, 36 human children were learning what it meant to be merchandise in a universe that didn't value their humanity. "5 minutes to insertion point," Kai called from the pilot station. "Sensor contacts are showing normal patrol patterns, but that could change once we cross the threshold." Amy checked her medical kit one final time, her fingers moving over supplies with the automatic precision of someone who'd patched up too many casualties in too many impossible situations. "Cole, there's something you should know before we do this." "What's that?" "I lied about why I left Special Operations Command." She looked up from her kit, meeting his eyes directly. "I didn't retire. I was discharged after I killed a slaver who'd been trafficking human children through the Vega system." Cole felt his estimation of the good doctor shift several notches upward. "Court-martial?" "Self-defense, officially. The slaver made the mistake of trying to kill me when I discovered his operation." Amy's smile was sharp enough to perform surgery. "Unofficially, my commanding officer thought I showed poor judgment in not calling for backup before I put 3 plasma bolts through the bastard's head." "And now?" "Now I think he was right. I should have called for backup." She gestured around the cramped freighter. "Good thing I've got some this time." Cole was about to respond when every alarm on Vex's ship started screaming in harmony. The smuggler's cheerful expression vanished, replaced by the focused intensity of someone who'd survived this long by taking threats seriously. "We've got company," he announced. 3 Scaroth patrol ships, closing fast on an intercept course. Through the view screen, Cole could see the alien vessels approaching like metal sharks, cutting through the nebula's crimson gases. They were smaller than Gextor's flagship, but heavily armed, their scaled hulls gleaming with the same predatory menace that had haunted his nightmares. "So much for stealth," Hammer muttered, checking his demolition charges. "Change of plans," Cole announced, settling into the gunner's station with grim satisfaction. "We go in loud." The first Scaroth patrol ship opened fire with the kind of enthusiasm that suggested they really enjoyed their work. Vex threw his ship into an evasive spiral that would have impressed a professional stunt pilot, while Cole returned fire with the freighter's surprisingly effective weapons array. "How illegal are these modifications?" Amy shouted over the sound of incoming fire. "Extremely illegal," Vex replied cheerfully. "The kind that gets you executed in most civilized systems." "Good," Cole said, watching his shots punch through Scaroth armor plating. "I was worried we might be following regulations." The battle was brief, violent, and extremely educational. Cole learned that Scaroth patrol ships were fast but fragile, that Vex's illegal weapon modifications were worth every credit he'd probably paid for them, and that Amy had been understating her military background when 3 precise shots from her position took out the command bridge of the 2nd patrol vessel. "Well," Vex said, as the 3rd Scaroth ship exploded in a satisfying fireball, "so much for the element of surprise. Gextor definitely knows we're coming now." Cole watched the burning wreckage drift past their view screen and felt something cold and primal settle in his chest. The war chief had laughed while stealing human children, confident in his superiority over a species he considered soft and weak. Time to teach him about the difference between soft and defenseless. "Good," Cole said, checking his weapon one final time. "I was hoping he'd be awake when we arrived." Gextor's processing station hung in the crimson void like a mechanical tumor, all harsh angles and predatory design. As Vex's ship limped toward the docking bay, Cole counted no fewer than 18 weapon emplacements tracking their approach. The war chief wasn't taking any chances with uninvited guests. "Docking bay is opening," Kai reported from the pilot's station. "Looks like they want to have a face-to-face conversation about our poor life choices." "How thoughtful of them," Cole replied, checking his plasma rifle one final time. 8 rotations since his last combat deployment, but muscle memory was a beautiful thing. His hands moved through the weapon check with automatic precision, each motion as familiar as breathing. Amy finished prepping her medical kit and pulled out something that definitely hadn't come from the colony's standard supplies. The weapon looked like it had been designed by someone with a doctorate in applied violence and a minor in aesthetic intimidation. "Military-grade neural disruptor," she explained when she noticed Cole's raised eyebrow. "Sometimes the best medicine is preventive." Hammer hefted his demo charges with the satisfied expression of an artist contemplating his masterpiece. "Give me 10 minutes with this station's power core, and Gextor won't be going anywhere for a very long time." 5 minutes, Cole corrected. "We don't have time for artistic expression." The docking bay was exactly what you'd expect from a slaving operation. Sterile, functional, and designed by someone who'd never heard of basic aesthetic principles. 20 Scaroth warriors waited in formation, weapons trained on the freighter's exit ramp. Behind them stood War Chief Gextor himself, golden eyes glittering with the kind of amusement that belonged on a cat watching mice trying to operate heavy machinery. "Well, well," Gextor announced as Cole's team descended the ramp. "The local security chief has come calling." How delightfully unexpected. Cole walked forward with the casual confidence of someone who'd faced worse odds and lived to complain about them. "Gextor, you've got something that belongs to us." The war chief's laughter echoed through the docking bay like breaking glass. "Belongs to you? My dear little mammal, those children belong to whoever has the strength to take them. Currently, that would be me." "Currently," Cole agreed, "but the day's still young." Such confidence from such a small creature. Gextor gestured to his warriors, who tightened their formation but didn't open fire. "Tell me, Commander Cole, what exactly do you hope to accomplish here? You are 4 individuals aboard my station, surrounded by my warriors, facing my superior firepower. Even by human standards, this seems remarkably foolish." Cole smiled, and something in that expression made several Scaroth take an involuntary step backward. "You made a mistake, Gextor. You took our cubs." "Yes, I did. And very profitable cubs they'll be. See, that's where you misunderstood something fundamental about human nature." Cole's voice carried the patient tone of a teacher explaining basic concepts to a particularly slow student. Other species fight for territory, resources, mating rights. Humans fight for our children. And when we fight for our children, we don't fight to win. We fight until the threat is eliminated, regardless of cost. Gextor's amusement flickered slightly. Brave words from someone who couldn't protect them in the first place. "You're right. I failed them once." Cole's hand moved to his weapon with casual precision. "I won't fail them again." The firefight that followed lasted exactly 93 seconds and redefined several Scaroth concepts about human combat capabilities. Cole moved like liquid death, his plasma rifle spitting coherent energy with surgical precision. Amy flanked left, her neural disruptor dropping warriors faster than bad news at a funeral. Hammer went right, his demo charges turning defensive positions into abstract art installations. Kai, meanwhile, had somehow acquired a Scaroth plasma cannon and was demonstrating why human pilots had a reputation for creative weapon applications. When the smoke cleared, 18 Scaroth warriors were down, Gextor was backing toward an emergency exit, and Cole was advancing with the relentless pace of an approaching meteor. "Impossible," the war chief hissed, his golden eyes wide with something approaching fear. "Your species is weak, soft. You're builders, not warriors." "You're half right," Cole admitted, cornering Gextor against a bulkhead. "We are builders. We build civilizations, communities, families. And when something threatens what we've built, we become something else entirely." "What's that?" Cole's smile was colder than vacuum. "Your worst nightmare." The final confrontation took place in Gextor's throne room, a gaudy chamber decorated with trophies from 100 slave raids. Cole found the war chief cowering behind his oversized chair. All his predatory confidence evaporated, like morning mist. "The children," Cole said simply. "Where are they?" "Cargo holds 6, Gextor stammered. "Unharmed, as per client specifications." "Good. Now here's what's going to happen." Cole leveled his rifle at the alien's head. "You're going to release them. You're going to power down your ship's weapons. And then you're going to send a message to every slaver in this sector, explaining why trafficking human children is a career-limiting decision." "You can't simply execute me," Gextor protested. "There are galactic laws, conventions." "The same laws that protected those children?" Cole's voice carried the flat finality of a closing coffin lid. "The same conventions that prevented you from stealing them in the first place?" Gextor opened his mouth to respond, then closed it as he realized the fundamental flaw in his argument. "Here's a new law for you," Cole continued. "Touch a human child, and humans will find you. It doesn't matter how far you run, how well you hide, or how many allies you think you have. We'll find you, and we'll end you." The plasma bolt that followed was swift, clean, and entirely final. As Gextor's body hit the deck plating with a satisfying thud, Cole felt something shift in the galaxy's balance of power. The war chief's flagship began broadcasting automated distress signals, but they fell on deaf ears. Hammer had done his work well. The station's communication arrays were scattered across 3 different star systems by now. "Cole!" Amy's voice crackled through his comm unit. "We've got a problem. The Scaroth crew is trying to jettison the cargo holds into the nebula." Cole was moving before she finished speaking, his boots pounding against metal deck plating as he raced through corridors that reeked of alien fear and human determination. The cargo bay doors were cycling open when he arrived, crimson nebula gases swirling beyond the atmospheric barrier like hungry ghosts. 3 Scaroth technicians were frantically working the ejection controls, probably hoping to destroy the evidence of their crimes before Cole could reach them. It was, Cole reflected, as he systematically shot each one, a remarkably stupid plan from creatures who were supposed to be intelligent predators. The ejection sequence halted with 6 seconds to spare. 20 minutes later, 36 human children walked free from their containment fields, blinking in the light of their rescue. Emma clutched her recovered stuffed rabbit, while Marcus tried to explain to the younger ones why the scary aliens wouldn't be bothering them anymore. David, the teenager who'd tried to stand up to Gextor, approached Cole with the kind of serious expression that belonged on someone 3 times his age. "Sir, are we going home now?" Cole looked around at the children, these remarkable young humans who'd survived something that would have broken adults. They were scared, traumatized, but unbroken. Still human, still precious, still worth everything he'd risked to get them back. "Yeah," he said, his voice rough with emotions he couldn't quite name. "We're going home." 6 months later, Kepler Station had been rebuilt, its defenses upgraded with technology salvaged from Gextor's station. The children played in corridors once again filled with laughter, their artwork covering walls that had seen too much violence. Cole stood at his old observation post, watching the morning shift head out to the excavation sites. The routine was the same, but something fundamental had changed. Word had spread through the galactic underworld about what happened when someone threatened human cubs. Slave raids on human colonies had dropped by 96%. Cole smiled, listening to Emma's laughter echoing through the corridors as she chased Marcus through their eternal game of tag. The universe had learned an important lesson about humanity's protective instincts. Some lessons, Cole reflected, were worth teaching at any cost. The datapad on his desk chimed softly, displaying another intelligence report from Amy's network of contacts. 3 more slaving operations had voluntarily relocated their activities to sectors with no human presence. A Vorthon crime syndicate had issued a galaxy-wide memo specifically excluding human colonies from their target lists. The Hegemony Council was drafting new legislation protecting sentient juveniles, largely because their member species had suddenly developed a healthy respect for human retribution. Cole picked up Emma's stuffed rabbit from his desk. She'd given it to him as a thank-you present, insisting that brave commanders needed something soft to hug when the nightmares came. The rabbit sat there now, one button eye still missing, a silent reminder that some things in the universe were worth protecting regardless of the cost. Outside his window, the children of Kepler Station played under artificial suns that would never again be dimmed by predators who mistook human compassion for weakness. The galaxy was a safer place now, though it had taken a war chief's death to make it so. Cole leaned back in his chair and smiled. Sometimes the best diplomacy was applied through a plasma rifle's barrel, and the most effective peace treaties were written in the blood of those who threatened what humans held most dear. The predator had laughed while stealing the cubs. He never laughed again after that night.